Hello there.
And there he is. There he is. I'm on this
How's it
evening with
going?
Steve N. Allen.
Hello. How are things?
Hello. Hello. Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you for your time this evening. I really do appreciate it. I know you're a busy man. You haven't just come off the TV, have you?
No, no. I mean, last time I was on it, well, yesterday. But that's I've had enough time to wash since then, so it's fine.
No, that's all right. I see you've washed your hair. Wash and go's working really well for you.
The going part is, yeah, yeah.
Yes, not for me, unfortunately, just going grey. I'd just like to have a bit of time to talk about your career, how you got to where you got to. I've been doing this for about 5 weeks, so if I hiccup or fart, I do apologize. Um,
Fair enough.
the difference is this is not going to be edited in any way. Once it goes up, it's up. So tell me about stand-up. What was it like when you started? Was it funnier than it is now?
Whereas in the world of stand-up, it was easier, not to be funny, but easier to get gigs. I was very lucky that I started at a time when the open mic circuit, I was living in London at the time. The open
Yeah.
mic circuit in London was just massive. So you could, every night of the week, you could go and do a gig. These days, I hear tell of these bringer gigs, these horrible imports from America where you have to turn up with audience members. So the whole
Oh.
thing is just some sort of Ponzi scheme. So like it's a house of cards. It shouldn't exist. But people want stage time, so they have to turn up with at least one person. So if everyone does that, you've kind of got an audience. I don't think I'd have been a comedian if that's what I had to do. So back in the day, I just filled my diary rocking up to these gigs. I used to be a travel newsreader at the time. And I
Right.
worked in Centrepoint for Traffic Link, as it was back then. And so, being in Centrepoint, you'd finish a shift, and you just get anywhere in London to go and do gigs. So I did probably about 4 years of 6 nights a week, just doing that. Which is probably why that relationship I was in at the time ended. But that's not the only relationship that's been impacted by stand-up, and that's just my priority. It's the way it is.
No, no, that's fair enough. And then from there, you went into, from my little bit of research, you did some broadcasting, writing, satire, which I think is brilliant comedy. Whoever's doing it, I'm not blowing smoke up your backside. I really like a good bit of satire. And now you're on GB News as well.
So yeah, that and talk. Basically, I mean,
Talk as
most of
well.
the outlets talk. Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm also every so often I'm on Five Live, which out of all the ones that I turn up on, I guess Five Live isn't leaning to the right, but it's the marketplace where if you want to do discussion, it's the main place to do it. It's been a while since I've been booked for anything that was LBC, which some people would think is right leaning, some people's left leaning. I've been on Ian Dale show a while back in the day. It's just a really hard place for me to turn up there with my name. There aren't many shows that want me on there because Steve Allen was one of their big famous presenters who left under some sort of interesting circumstance. So with my name, I
Okay.
can't even get through the door. It's a shame. I could have covered his shows. They could have used the same jingles.
Well, there's
Um,
that.
yeah, yeah, would have saved them some money. But yeah, so if you want to talk news, you kind of got to go to the news channels that have comedians on talking about it. So yeah, it's an interesting time. I'm lucky because I've never been forced to start to say things that I don't believe in, or
That's good.
never been silenced. And they for Ofcom reasons have to have people on who lean to the left, who are willing to challenge some of their points of view. So whatever that happens, there's money to be made for me. So I do turn up there and argue.
No, no, absolutely. And I've had some back and forth with Leo Kearse off camera. I think he's a very funny guy.
Yeah.
I had Peter C. Barnes give me some of his time on here. And on my birthday, it was Peter C. Barnes and Andrew Pearce as well. So that was quite
Nice.
nice. It was a busy birthday for me, but you know what? It was worth it. I'm what they currently call an emerging creator, so I'll take the opportunities as they pop up.
Yeah,
Um,
nice. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm not the funniest of people, but I do follow comedians. I miss headliners. I'm going to say that right now.
Yeah.
I used to stay up for headliners. I used to think that was very funny. Like I said, I like the satire side of things. Do you think so? Going back to what you said about the audience, people will say like comedy's gone woke and whatever else. Do you think it's harder to be funny now because of the way the rules have changed? The game has changed somewhat.
I don't really know. I sit and ponder this so many, and depending on which day, I'll come down on one side of the fence or the other.
Mm,
It is true that it feels like there's greater pressure to not do something that will cancel your career. That wasn't a phrase that would have been used 10 years ago, and yet now it is. But at the same time, I can't think of a thing I can't say that I want to say. And I can't think of things that I don't even want to say that would genuinely impact my career, unless it's something that isn't funny and is just offensive. But then that always would have caused some sort of problem. It just wouldn't have been called being cancelled for not being woke. So I don't know. I mean, like you mentioned the fact that Headliners was a show. That was a good example of how TV, that part of TV, had comedy on in a way that no one would describe as woke at all. So
Mm,
there's space out there that's not impacted by what we think is the woke pressure on comedy. Comedy clubs, comedy venues, some of them, depending on like the ethos of those who run them, wouldn't book certain comedians. Maybe
yeah.
that's always been the case, though. I don't know. I was watching this video last night about Jerry Seinfeld flipping from saying like there is no pressure, your job is to just go down the slalom and work out what's not offensive, and then he was on some chat show saying, "Oh, you can't say anything these days." And at the time, I was thinking, if he thinks he can't say anything, that
Yeah, it's
the
quite.
cleanest comedian ever can't say anything. But I don't know. I can't see anything that he used to do that would have got him in trouble these days. So I'm not sure he really believes it. So I don't know. It's a different landscape comedy wise. I'm not sure it's got smaller for all of this talk of cancellation.
Okay. So where do you stand on, say, speaking of comedy and free speech, Frankie Boyle? Now, as it when I was an adolescent, Frankie Boyle was he was that our version of like Jimmy Carr. He was saying things that were very close to the mark, especially like you think about the jokes he made about Katie Price's son, things like
Hmm.
that. I don't think you would get away with that now.
Maybe not if you did that on TV. But again, where on the BBC? Probably not. On
No.
GB News, not that headliners is a space anymore, but if it were, I don't know. I think we'd still get away with those jokes. At a gig, I've often thought there's such a different world between stand-up comedy gigs, especially if they're coming to see you, if your name's on the ticket, and broadcast, because it depends who's doing what where. At a comedy gig, someone's made the effort, tacitly agreed to be in the room that you've pre-planned. So if you're
Mm,
coming to see my show, you just got to sit there and suck it up. Whatever I say is my show, and you've decided to watch it. So if you complain about it, you'll be in the whiny little one there. But if I'm broadcasting into your front room. So actually, I should have to live up to a different standard because it's not
no,
like
that's
you've
good.
tacitly agreed before to just deal with whatever sewage I wish to pump out. So that's different in terms of broadcast. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are still spaces where comedy happens. If we're just thinking about the BBC, as people tend to when they talk about cancellation, yeah, it's changed. I don't think you'd
Mm.
get Faulty Towers made anymore. Media
And
in
I like
general,
classic comedy. Sorry, just to
oh yeah,
interject. I love Blackadder. I love Fawlty Towers. Hell, I will watch Dad's Army and still chuckle.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, of course. I mean, don't tell me Name Pike is just one of the best jokes ever written, isn't it? It literally is a one-liner.
Yeah.
Most one-liners are two lines, but that bang on. Yes,
Or
all of these things.
Baldrig's
Maybe,
Cunning Plan.
yeah, maybe they wouldn't get made anymore. But they're still on TV. So it's not like the media landscape is thoroughly banned them. We could have a little cul-de-sac conversation about trigger warnings that most of which shouldn't be needed. There was a story last week in the news about Tommy Cooper now has trigger warnings on repeats of his shows on ITVX. And again, surely one of the least offensive comedians ever.
I can't think
He's
of anything he ever did, and I watched him about 4 years older than my granddad.
Yeah, I mean the classic joke is I went to the doctors and I said it hurts when I do this. He said, well, don't do it. If you're sat at home going, well, I went to the doctors and I'm affected by that, jog on. You know what I mean?
Yes.
He's not an offensive comedian. The problem is all yours. And also, if you're watching a repeat of a comedy show from the 1970s and you don't know the views might be outdated, you don't understand maths.
Well,
Again,
there
you're
is
the
that.
problem.
So
Yeah. So go on.
as a 20 something, I discovered Bill Hicks, I discovered George Carlin, and I sort of fell into that niche, I guess. And I'm still there now. Who would you say your inspiration was for going into comedy like you have?
So weird. I was a weird child. I went through a really weird phase where I would record anytime there was a Marx Brothers film on Channel 4. The best thing my parents ever did, they bought me a video recorder, secondhand video recorder. Up north, that was like a big deal that I had a video recorder in my room. So
Betamax
I'd
or
record.
VHS?
It was VHS. I was lucky about on that. The VHS downstairs, and they got me a knackered old VHS for upstairs, so we could, exchange tapes. And I'd record anything that was comedy late at night when I wasn't awake, and watch it the next day. And I went through a phase of just being obsessed with the Marx Brothers, and I think that's where my love of the format of jokes comes from. The tightness of the
Hmm.
word usage by any. I mean, Chico can jog on really, and Harpo, I would fast forward through. I don't need to see honk honk. That's not comedy, but for all of the Groucho stuff, I'd absolutely love. But then also, I was kind of obsessed with Robin Williams, when I realized he was a stand-up, because you realize, oh, it's
Yeah,
From
yeah.
Mork and Mindy, there's a thing called stand-up. You record the
Come in.
specials, you watch them, and that was the reason I like the idea of doing stand-up. It's different to all the other art forms. It's pure, isn't it? Man, microphone, little bit of amplification, and you're in.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, I've not watched any of his stand-ups, but yeah, a family favorite in this house is definitely Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'd recommend to watch the stand up though, because like, every so often when he was kind of doing stand up in like on chat shows and stuff, it was more about the size of the performance because he could
Hmm.
just improv loudly. But the actual stand up shows when it was written, I mean, I wish I could get to that energy level, but just the way in which you just pump out all of that humor at such rate, the rate of knots is amazing. I've always liked that. I'm very much into joke density. I don't like stuff that takes long, and this is why it's difficult doing satire stuff because you've got to make points. But I like there to be a joke every second line. Recently, did a thing writing a comedy show, not a topical one, but writing a comedy show with someone else for Radio Four, and I was obsessed about that. If we were two sentences and there's not been a joke, we need something.
Hmm.
And as much as people besmirch things like The Big Bang Theory and those American shows, if you look at it, that's it: sentence, punchline, and they still manage to tell a story by being stuck to that restriction of like every second line's a punchline, but you still need to move the plot on. So I've got respect for stuff like that.
No, no, I can get that. I'm not a huge fan of that, I've got to admit.
Yeah.
But um, where do you stand on animated comedy? So I sort of gave up on The Simpsons after, say, series 8, when Homer just started hurting himself all the time. That's not really funny to me. I didn't
Yeah.
like Dirty Sanchez. I didn't like Jackass. It's not really my thing. Um, I grew out of South Park, but Futurama is definitely my baby, I think, because I grew up on
Oh yeah.
sci-fi and I grew up on The Simpsons. So the fact that they've combined it with a band that I like, which is the Beastie Boys, I thought was amazing. Do you have any comedy cartoons or animation that you sort of think, yeah, go on, I'll watch that?
I mean, I was the same. I've definitely been the same with The Simpsons. I don't have that staying power or enough time on the planet to try and catch up with Simpsons. Whereas South Park, I fell out of love with it. But then when those specials start being released, when they were doing contract negotiations, I watched those because it wasn't too much to try and consume. And now I'm back into it. And now
Mm,
they've the latest series, which I think there's some sort of deal or something for that series, or for however many more series they'll be pumping out for the next few years, plus some in distribution rights. They got something like £2.5 billion. So if you give some creators that level of money, I'm interested to see what they do because they've
yeah.
got full on FU money now, haven't they? They were
Well,
they were
that's it.
saying that anyway, but yeah.
I think the last thing I watched that really, really tickled me was the Harry and Meghan privacy tour.
Yeah.
I thought that was brilliant.
Exactly, they're doing it, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And then they
that's
did
what
the
satire is.
woke thing as well, which I thought
Yeah.
was brilliant, the
Yeah.
DEI, whatever it is. So the news cycle is consistent.
Yeah.
How do you keep the comedy fresh?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I suppose to be brutally honest, in some part you don't. You reuse because you can, and that's the only way to do topical stuff, I think, because you're right. Look, every so often the same news story will come around. And certainly
Hmm.
for the radio stuff that I do, which is, trying to be less edgy anyway. Every year, list of baby names comes out. There'll be same. You can trot out the same old joke on that. There are some
Yeah.
stories that perennials. You might as well reuse them. But I think you keep it fresh by well, I like to mix the part of my brain that does stand up and then does the TV topical stuff. Because on the way in to do a TV show, often I listen to the news stories when I'm driving in, so I've got the stories in my head. But I think watching some stand up or listening to some stand up kind of gets your brain in that mood. Or often writing stuff. I love it when I get an evening where I do a gig and then go to the studio to do the TV stuff because being in the stand up mood is the best frame of mind to write new stuff. And if your inspiration is the story they've just given you, great. It will be sharper than stuff I just write when I'm having a normal day. Um, and also, I'm slightly obsessed with the idea of making more jokes. My career would have been better if I were one of those polishers.
Hmm.
The people who just they write a 20-minute set and they spend years getting every word of it perfect and sharpening it, and then they end up with a great set. And I wish I could do that, but I can't because that's boring because there's another joke to write. And I would
Okay.
always rather like that one work right. What's the next thing to do? So yeah, if I couldn't write new stuff all the time, I'd be even more annoying to my spouse because I'd just be trying to do 5 minutes around the house. Like, what's the deal with what's happening in Epping? Yeah.
Oh, so what's your stance on that?
Oh, it's another one of those stories where Doesn't matter if you think Labour have good ideas, they've got some terrible execution. They've it's almost like it's masochistic. Like whenever they come around to a good idea, they manage to do it in a way to maximise the political damage, like the winter fuel allowance for the pensioners.
Hmm.
They've done a U-turn on that after we've got through the winter, and anyone who's going to hate them for it definitely hates them for it. They'll go, actually, we'll change our minds. Same thing with the investigation on the grooming gangs. Like we definitely need to say no until everyone hates us before we say yes. And the same thing's happening with Epping, right? This is a situation that they know no one wants to have hotels taken over like that. And they want it to end as well. But before it ends, they want to take the council to court. So they are definitely looking like the bad guy in court
Yeah,
as well. If there's one thing Starmer needs to not do is look like an evil lawyer, and courts are going to be his playground for it. It's like, I don't know who's advising them. I would, because I can spot this stuff coming a mile away. Like, no, if you do that, that's going to look really bad in the Daily Mail. For some reason, they don't care. I'd take their dirty money if they wanted to pay me.
I think we all would.
Yeah.
So you started on the stand-up route, is that right? Is my research right?
Well, kind of. So I started doing stand up and radio at the same time, but not like radio that anyone would notice. So travel newsreader. University did chemistry, and when I was doing chemistry, I started writing jokes for other radio presenters. Well, for radio presenter, I wasn't a radio presenter then, but it was my little hobby. And I'd just go through the newspapers, write a page of jokes, send them out to people, being like, if you want to use any of these, just let me know. Then eventually some of them kind of started paying me for it. So my university job was writing topical gags for, I think eventually I got up to 25 local radio stations across the UK
That's
using the
pretty
same
good.
jokes. Yeah,
All
no,
right.
yeah, because broadcast in different areas. No one ever knew. So that paid my way through university. After university, yeah, I did travel news, and then because there was an open mic night near to where I was working, I just eventually had to man up and do it. I love stand up, and I was not brave enough to do it. And oh, it was my first 5 minutes set was terrible. I don't think it. I'd be amazed if I got a laugh. I don't remember getting a laugh. I do remember struggling to breathe because I was so nervous. I was doing all of the breathing in and none of the breathing out.
Right.
So my lungs were just burning full of oxygen when I was trying to get through it. But I must have liked it because I carried on. And like most Tuesdays, I'd go back to that same gig. So yeah, it was radio and stand up both working at the same time. And that's kind of been the thing that's happened in my career. I've never let go of one side, which is always great because then when TV shows get cancelled, my diary's still got gigs in it. And when the gigs start to dry up, it's all right because I've got some TV work happening. And yeah, I think they call it a portfolio career. It's just more like being a terrified freelancer, though.
No, no, I get that. As I said to Peter C. Barnes, actually, you guys just seem to be living the dream. You get to do all these amazing things and meet these amazing people and get paid to do it.
Yeah, but you never know when it's going to end. That is the
And
terrifying
that's
cliff
the other
edge.
side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just talking about having your your lungs full of oxygen. Um, just to touch on that a little bit more, did you ever have like big nerves where it was more than that, or was that the worst sort of on stage incident for you?
Yeah, I think that's probably the worst, actually. I've been lucky. Loads of people say when they see me do stand up, they think I look confident. And it doesn't matter how unconfident I'm feeling in the moment, it never seems to be externalized. I
Okay.
think by being like a northern English Generation X bloke, working class, all of the things that means I don't have emotions. I was never allowed them. They were
No,
beaten
no, I
out of me
get
as a
that.
kid.
I was born
Yeah.
in Hull,
So
so I get that completely.
you know exactly what I mean. So it's just easier to have a poker face, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
you've just spent decades learning to slightly repress, maybe not to like some worrying level, but when things get a bit nervous, you know not to show it. Um, so yeah, I'm lucky, but also by doing radio, which means whatever I'm doing something that other people could consider to be one of their worst fears. It's like the Seinfeld bit about everyone hating public speaking so much. But when you get used to it, what's the worst that can happen? And this is the thing I think you learn from stand up.
Mhm.
The answer to the question, what's the worst that could happen, for a thing that terrifies people, the idea of getting on stage, trying to be funny, and no one laughs, this would ruin people's lives until you've done it. But then the next night you do another gig and it's fine. So the worst thing that happens is you have a sad drive home. That's not that bad, is it? You can
Well,
crack on
no,
and
that's
do
it.
another one the next night.
Yeah, just get over it and move on.
Yeah.
So what's the funniest thing that's happened to you while you've been doing a gig?
These are the ones where I wish my memory worked well enough. Oh, I used to do a bit where I was holding up a graph of I mean, this shows how long ago it was I was doing this open mic stuff. But there was Pavarotti died at the same time there was an earthquake in the UK. So it's a very obvious joke for a young
Of course it
comedian to
is.
point out that show the seismograph and this is the Verida, and just there was a guy in the front row who just looked so nonplussed, and I challenged him with it because this is a bit that was working. I did it for a few weeks, did it, and he just kind of stared blankly at me, and I said, "What's wrong with you? Can't you?" I can't remember the wording, but it was something like, "Can't you see look at the graph?" And he just pointed to his guide dog under his table, and I was done. I was picked
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
wrong guy, and it was just
Oh,
absolutely what a way to lose a room.
goodness, mate. Yeah, that's yeah. Okay, so if you could work with any comedian, who would it be?
Oh, interesting. Do you know what? Bill Maher.
Bill
Because
Maher.
yeah, every week when that show comes out, it's one of the things I listen to when I go on a run. And I think what he does there is what we need to be doing more of because it's comedy about the news, but it's
Hmm.
not just knob gags for the sake of knob gags, but it doesn't shy away from knob gags. Perfect. Like this is one thing about the Daily Show as well that we get it wrong over here. They, especially in the Jon Stewart original era,
Yeah, yeah.
would make commentary and be proud to land on that knob gag at the end of it. So that's why you got to make it funny. It's easy to do this in America because audiences will whoop at more stuff, and you need whooping when this stuff happens. But what Bill does, I think, is he's honest. He's willing to have points of view that his audience don't like, points of view that he does like, and he just does it with guests who know what they're talking about. He knows what he's talking about, but it always gets laughs. It's not something that ends up being too preachy at the expense of jokes. I wish we could do more of that over here. I don't know why we don't.
Do you prefer writing your own jokes, or would you prefer to have like the Americans do, like some of the Americans do, where they've got a team of people doing it?
Do you know? I mean, look. So the years on the Mash Report, there was a massive team of writers, and that was great. I mean, as long as I'm still writing, I don't need to, Orson Welles this bad boy. I'd be. It's great. I always used to think when I was like a writer, I used to be a writer for Heart FM for like the Theakston Breakfast Show, and
Oh,
people
right.
would say, do you not feel like you're selling yourself there? This guy's getting paid loads, and you're doing the writing." But I couldn't have earned that money because no one knew who I was, whereas he was famous. Well, but when it was flipped the other way around, there's a team of writers, and I was reading it out. I used to think, would I feel as satisfied knowing that the big laugh might not be my joke? And yeah, it turns out I'm that shallow. Just give me a room full of people laughing, and I'll enjoy it regardless of who wrote the words. So yeah, I suppose if you're really getting a big project, getting some writers behind it as well would elevate it to another level. Maybe that's something we didn't do on Headliners because we're all just doing our own stuff. We could
I
have
always
maybe
saw
added another level.
I always saw Headline as more of like an open free speech, if you will, version of Have I Got News for You? Because as a
Yeah,
young man, I used to watch Have I Got News for You, and it used to be funny. It's not anymore. And I used to watch Nevermind the Buzzcocks back when it was Mark Lamar, and that used
yeah.
to be funny. And then it just sort of died, like it was like a dying swan towards the end. It was just not funny. So something changed along the way. And I've got to ask, what happened to our headliners? It just disappeared one day.
Yeah, I think it's just not what the channel wanted. I mean, it took longer than just today. I think we had a sense that it was probably coming, and then it didn't quite fit in. One of the beautiful things about it, and the problem with it, is it didn't quite fit in with the roster of what was on the channel.
Mm.
And that was nice. Loads of people thought it was like the little palate cleanser at the end of the day,
Yeah,
covering the
yeah.
same stories and different stories. We used to churn through 20 stories in an hour, which is more than most other places could do. Because you could do it so quickly. Comedians are good at doing things with brevity because we all learn to trim out the words you don't need, have the impactful things right at the end of the sentence to make the punchline punch, and then crack on to the next one. Um, yeah, so it ended up just disappearing because I don't think it fit in. What they've got now fits better. It's a shame. It's a shame there's not a comedy channel out there that wants to do it rather than a news channel
Mm.
because then it would have been something that could have lasted longer. But I keep thinking while the comedians were doing like the free form version of I Got News for You, the host could have had stronger gags in the setup. Like, there would have been a way to pack
Yeah.
some scripted stuff in there as well, just so it could be funnier. It's the hit rate of jokes again. I reckon we could have got it higher. And maybe if there's another show that some comedy channel wants to do. I don't know. I feel that it might never happen though because TV's not going that way. It'll be an internet thing. And this is what I meant
Yeah.
to say earlier in answer to the question about has comedy gone woke? Is it not funny? Everyone just thinks about the BBC or just TV. Well, these days, most people are probably watching their comedy not on broadcast TV, streaming stuff, but probably just YouTube. And is YouTube a space where you have to be woke? No. I think the internet democratizes all of this stuff, doesn't it? So
Hmm.
the jokes that you might have seen on original version of I Got News for You would be mild in comparison to what you could pipe down the internet. So I think we might be maybe we're safe.
Yeah, that sounds like it. And I think you've just answered my next question, which was how you see comedy going in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. And I think you're right. YouTube or streamers, they have that sort of ring fence safe area, really,
Yeah.
for people to have that speech. It's not
And
compelled.
yeah, one of the things that I hated originally, but now I'm starting to enjoy, is that back in the day, podcast meant podcast, isn't it? You'd listen to it on your iPod. That's why they were called podcasts.
Yeah.
Etymology was given doing all the work. And then there was this shift where you couldn't do a podcast without filming it and having more money spent on the lighting than you did on the mics and putting it on YouTube. And for a while, I was like, well, it's a video then. Why are we calling them podcasts? But slowly but surely, like Opal Fruits and X, I'm now calling podcasts if they're just on YouTube because it is a better format, and a lot of it looks just as good as you'd get on TV channels. So actually, what different? And YouTube is an app on TVs now. So what is
It
the
is,
difference
yeah.
between YouTube and TV? It's other than a slightly different way you search for it. It's basically the same.
I think that's the thing about YouTube. It's a play on words. They used to, if I remember rightly, and my history is usually pretty good, but I'm sure someone will fact check me if I'm wrong. They used to call the TV the tube in the
Yeah,
50s. So it's you on the tube. So it is literally you on TV.
yeah. That's because of cathode ray tubes. That's what TVs were before they
Uh,
were flat screen LED, LCD nonsense. Your cathode ray, yeah. Look
The
at me
big
with
back
some.
TVs.
Yeah, I understand electrons. It's one
There
thing
you
I
go.
can still remember from university. I know about electrons.
That's way beyond me. I'm not going to lie. Um, if you could, just to wrap up, because I know you've given me quite a bit of your time and it is quite late in the evening, and I do appreciate it. So, two questions. Number one, um, if you could do your dream comedy project, so say, I don't know, Elon's throwing you FU money,
Yeah.
yeah, what would it be? Would it be TV, radio, animation? What would it look like? What sort of jokes would you want to do? Would it be like the headliners thing we were just discussing? Or would you want to do something a bit more nuanced?
Do you know? I know. I think this is why I'm so sad that headline has ended. It was so close to what my ideal would be because the idea of it being relatively free form, it's not all about being scripted and it just being comedians using comedian brains on the news. So it'd be that, but we would have needed a live audience ideally. Then you'd film it on the day and edit it down. It would be some sort of weird mix between Mash Report and Headliners, the two main things that I've done. Because those years of doing the Mash Report, I knew I could see what happened. We filmed for 2 hours and it trimmed down to 27 minutes or whatever it was, and it then meant you got all the stuff that really landed.
Yeah,
So if we did that, if we did basically did Headliners live, but with good scripting in all the formatics parts in the host script, but then also got to edit down to the hilarious stuff. So again, it makes it a bit more Have I Got News for You-ish, but just without all the shackles. And yeah,
mm,
so yeah, trim that down, pop that on some streamer or on YouTube. I think you'd have something that would be great. It would be hilarious, and it would end up being like a really good record of what the news is,
yeah,
because that's what you get by look. Loads of people on the right don't like some of the stuff that the late night shows in America do, and they're not the future because the audience isn't there. But I do like the fact that if you want to find out what happened in a certain year, you could just randomly pick some of those shows, and they're covering the main news. Comedians need to be doing that. It's sad that we live in a country that doesn't really have that, other than have I got news for you and the news quiz. We need more comedians talking about the news. Newspaper review shows should have comedians on. So hopefully Sky would start, getting someone in. It has to be a comedian who's joking about the news, not about themselves. That's one thing I think ruins trying to do satire. You need to make sure the target of the joke is always the news, so it doesn't stop the next joke being about the news, and then you can
yeah.
carry on in that direction. It's too easy to derail a bit by making it funny about you being funny, and then the host would have to reset. So I'm never into that. And this is another example of what I see Bill Maher doing and think he gets it right. There's never a stupid joke that stops the conversation. It all carries on.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So, final joke, final question. Um, if you weren't a comedian, what would you be doing, Steve?
It's a really good question, actually, because if I'd have bailed early enough, I'd have, I love the chemistry when I did it at university. I almost stopped on to do extra, research and PhD in inorganic. I was offered the chance to stay on to look into bismuth poisoning of yttrium superconductors. And at the time, I remember I had a conversation with Dr. Hariljak, who was the guy who was saying, like, you should do this. And I was so convinced I was going to go off and be famous. I was like, no, I've got plans, I've got dreams. And there's been many times in my career when I've been thinking, maybe I should have been looking into this bismuth poisoning lark. I could have had like a nice house, nice car. So if I'd have bailed early, I would have done that. But there was a time when I was just mainly doing stand up before MASH came along. So I was just doing a bit of radio, a bit of stand up. The radio slightly dried up, and I thought, I'm going to have to get a real job for the first time. I'll go and have a word. I live near a Sainsbury's. I thought I'll go and have a word with the Sainsbury's to see if I could just push the trolleys round in the day and then gig in the evening. And they needed references, and I didn't have any because I hadn't had a job. And it was just that moment of realizing I can't get a job pushing the trolleys in Sainsbury's. So I think I'd be unemployed. I don't know if I wasn't a comedian, no one else would hire me. So I'm glad I still get to do this.
No, no, and you're completely crushing it. Definitely a funny guy. I got to say, I really enjoyed the Super Tramp bit that you did as well. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, I mean, as you can see, I realize my blue background is lighting you in a bad way. I can
No,
see
it's fine.
your laptop is really burning through your eyes. But yeah, I've got the studio space at home, so I'm just trying to chuck more stuff out on the internet now.
No, that's good. That's good. Keep doing it. Thank you for your time, Steve.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.